You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. All right, Shea, let's first start with the two decommits because it's got a lot of people a little antsy, right? I mean, you have this great season and now two defensive linemen jump ship. Let's take them one at a time. Maybe start with Jaron Reed.
Yeah. Well, look, and in fact, we'll start with Mickens because I think we'll talk more about Reed here because I want to hear your thoughts. Mickens is from Indianapolis. LSU, Brian Kelly and Brian Polian have both been recruiting him at Notre Dame, so they already knew him and got him on board, top 100 guy from Indianapolis, a couple hours, interstate, right down the highway to Ohio State's campus. In the past year, I think you're coupling geography, the reality that about a month ago or a few weeks ago Ohio State offered, with also just some personal stuff. His father passed away in the past year, and I think if he had the opportunity to be home at a big-time school, he was going to take it and got the Ohio State offer and official visited this past weekend and has not flipped, but opened things back up and wrote a kind of a nice post on his social media about thanking the LSU fans and Brian Kelly and Polian for recruiting him. But all expectations are he goes to Ohio State, and I don't think there was anything LSU could have done about that. The Jaron Reed one is interesting, and I'll ask you this, Matt, and it's okay to talk about NIL now and publicly, and schools are pushing for it, and that was part of Jaron Reed making a move into Auburn's class. He does it on Friday before they even have a coach. They don't even have a staff.
Said it on Friday. It's always pretty odd when a guy flips to a school that doesn't even have a head coach. So obviously you knew NIL or something else was at play there, no doubt.
So, yes. But now, again, he's from Georgia. Then again, it's right across the state line. I think he's about 30 to 40 minutes from their campus. So he had been around a lot, and I think they're trying to right now make a splash. I'm watching them do it with Bama's commitments, doing it with Georgia's commitments, trying to make a splash on, hey, how do we come out of the gates with a little bit of mojo between a hire and maybe landing some kids that were not expected to go here around signing, coming up with the lead up to signing day, and all of a sudden Auburn surging into the fold. So it'll be something to watch. And I've said this before, people, if you're listening and you just hear NIL, you think, well, then if Auburn was going to pay him some, then why can't LSU do the same? I think LSU's NIL approach, for me at least, and from talking to people around the industry, is similar to Bama's and Ohio State and Kirby Smart at Georgia, where once you get onto campus, you've got a lot of opportunities kind of at your fingertips to explore, not so much as what some people would accuse, and I'm not saying this, I'm just saying how the rhetoric will go, is like a pay-for-play, which is what they want to avoid. Some heavy investment on the front end just to land a kid, and I think we saw A&M do that, and I think, got criticized by Saban and others, and I'm not going to be surprised if Auburn is the team that people sort of circle this cycle as, hey, they were the ones that tried to come out and make a big splash right away.
Are you noticing any type of shift in behavior on the NIL front a year and a half in?
In terms of recruits?
Yeah.
Some. Yeah. And look, people are going to also say, well, this kind of stuff has been around forever. It was just under the table. Okay, fair. Well, it also, now that it's above the table, it's illegal, and you've got all these options, then, yeah, I think some kids are trying to explore what that means, and you hear all these rumors about what this kid's making and this kid's making, and I think behind the scenes, some of these kids have a better grip of, okay, some of this is kind of fantasy land, throwing around numbers, and here's the reality of what's at play. But, yeah, I do think some kids are looking at how does NIL come into play if I'm going to this school or that school or, another. But I still think the percentage is small of kids who are just going to commit somewhere because they have some great NIL deal for them. Like, I don't think we're not to the point at the tipping point where that's like the driving factor of all these recruits' decisions. We're far from it in my mind.
LSU did get a commit for 2025, Shea. What can you tell us about cornerback Jalen Bell?
Yeah, it's a long way away.
Right.
We're talking about 2023 right now. Now we're getting into the 2025 class. This is a kid who, out of Grayson, which Grayson, for those familiar with Georgia high school football, it's excellent high school football per capita. They're one of the best states, kind of even right above Louisiana, in terms of kind of who's available every year. And Grayson is one of the best high schools LSU now has a commitment who's a senior at Grayson, a junior at Grayson, and a sophomore at Grayson. So a bit of a pipeline there. And it's a school that Georgia recruits well. Tennessee always recruits Grayson kids. So you like to be in there. Bell, look, he's a sophomore in high school, so he's got so much time left to develop his game and everything like that. I think early on, they've got him ranked as a top 10 corner nationally, number 6 corner in the country on the On3 consensus. But again, far time away. He was their first 2025 commitment. So a little bit of work being done to the future, the future of the future, even further along than just next year's class.
He's on Twitter at Shea Dixon. Shea, I want to talk about LSU's class here in a bit. But the other sort of very, very notable thing is that the transfer portal opens, on the 5th. So that's next Monday. Are we expecting a lot of movement from LSU as far as current players entering the portal?
I mean, I would think so. I would think anywhere from 8 to 10 guys, maybe. And I don't think it's any of your starters. I don't think we're in a situation like that. I think what LSU is going to experience right now is very much what the portal's designed for, which is some guys who might be older in their careers. Look, you can take a look at who participated in senior night, Cam Wire and Mike Jones, 2 guys who have eligibility left. They started in the very first week. They weren't starters by the end of the year. It's only fair if those guys are not going to play next year that they can go play somewhere else. And I don't know for sure that's what both those guys are doing. I'm just using it as an example. But there's going to be some backups, I think, in a number of positions. O-line actually has a lot of guys, and they really leaned on like 6 or 7 of them this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some in that group. So I would anticipate, knock on wood for you LSU fans, I don't think it's anybody that's starting for you that all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. A lot of people did that with Keyshawn Boutte a year ago, all of that. I don't think any of that's coming. I think it'll just be more guys looking for playing time at other spots, which kind of just you file it under natural attrition, which is something you plan for.
Yeah, I think you're right with offensive line for sure. Bigger question might be also where does LSU look into the portal to supplement a class which currently has 23 commitments?
Well, I mean, I think position-wise, for me, last year, the biggest worry was corner, and they had to go to the portal and get all of their starters. I mean, Mekhi Garner, Converse, Richardson, Banks, who got injured, obviously, Greg Brooks, who played a lot of nickel for him. Everyone was a transfer. But the good thing this year was that you could lean on them. They were all really experienced guys. The bad part about that is they have no eligibility left, or they're going pro, and probably in Mekhi Garner's case. So I almost feel like they have to do it all over again. And I had thought that last year. I said, look, this is probably a multi-year rebuild if this is what the approach they're going to take in terms of taking a bunch of veterans, and there was nothing wrong with that. It's going to be a multi-year rebuild. So corner, I know people talk about D-tackle. They recently lost a defensive tackle commitment in Jaron Reed, which we talked about. So that could be a spot you're looking at, especially if you lose to Quellen Roy. And I know you get Mason Smith back. That's massive.
Sure.
But still think that's a spot you watch for. And maybe tight end. Look, if they want to buy, I don't knock at all what, Kelly and Denbrock. These guys have great success with tight ends. You look back even with Kelly at Cincinnati when he had Kelsey there. I mean, there's a long history of having good tight ends. But if they really want to go full into that offense, the Denbrock offense, which that's what they want to do, so be it. You need more tight ends. You can't keep rolling with, what they've got, which is essentially a couple walk-ons and then 2 scholarship players. So I won't be surprised if they try to get to the portal. In fact, I'll say this, Matt, they only have 1 offer out in the portal right now, and it's to a tight end. So that's a priority spot.
He's on Twitter at Shea Dixon, of course, On3Sports, the Bengal Tiger. Let's talk numbers, Shea. And we know the hard cap's gone. So for those that don't know, that means you're not capped to 25 anymore. You can sign as many players as you want. You just can't go over the 85 on your roster. So they're at 23 right now. Shea, how many more high school prospects are you anticipating them taking in this class?
I think somewhere around 5 is probably right. I mean, when you're above 20, the bulk of your high school class is done. So if they were at 25, now being at 23, I think they've got enough guys still out there. If you say maybe they've got about 10, 11, 12 guys that they've still got offers to who might be uncommitted or committed or potentially could get an offer late, that you kind of cut that group in half and just assume they might get, around 4 or 5 more guys. And we'll see if that number goes up by a little. Then that's fine. They're in comfortable scholarship shape and and we don't even know who's going pro or transferring out yet. So I don't think they're going to be in too much of a numbers crunch here. I think more so they'll be in a spot come spring where they can still add guys through the portal after, when you get into that second window.
That's a great point. And I think sometimes which is lost is remember, like, you can add players. I mean, Joe Burrow didn't show up here until May. So, like, you can still add guys even after spring if you need to. But if they take 5 more high school players, that would put them around 28. How many players via the portal? What was the number last year, Shea? 19? How many?
It depends. Yeah, 16 to 19. Depends on who really came through. Like Greg Clayton and them, I think they were preferred walk-ons, but they were transfers. So, yeah, it's in that 16 to 20 range.
So how many? It's not going to be that many, but how many this year?
No. 10 or so. I honestly think that when the dust settles, it will be as many guys as leave the team. Like for the portal. So however many guys that go into the portal, it's not a 1-for-1 thing where they have to sit around and wait for some guy to enter and then they get to replace him. But I think ultimately the numbers will look similar. That it could be around, 8 to 10 guys, and that's about how many they probably would lose from the team into the portal. So it kind of evens itself out.
And last thing for you, Shea, and I'm not sure if I talked about this yesterday. I'm not sure if you've given this any thought, but if Jaden Daniels does leave, do you think they would look to add a veteran quarterback for experience depth through the portal?
Well, I can't say no because I could argue that they had more experience at this time last year if that were the case, and they went and got Jaden Daniels. So probably, but I don't know. Thought has not crossed my mind just because I'm not under, I'm not thinking that Jaden will go pro or leave or any of that. But I don't know. That's intriguing. Would I be wrong in saying that? Did they pre-Jaden and post-Jaden right now, which group had more experience? Which one would you have felt better about?
Well, I mean, Brennan was a 5th-year guy, right? Or then a 6th-year
guy. And had played before.
And had played, yeah. I mean, right now, Nussmeier is your most experienced quarterback who's played in 9 games total with 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So, I mean, Shea, this is kind of the example I gave. If you look back to 2018, right, you had McMillan, Narcisse, Brennan. Well, right now, you've got Nussmeier, Howard, Ricky Collins. And they went and added, obviously, Burrow and became the greatest player in the history of the program. I just look at it like, man, if you have the option to add veteran depth and experience, why wouldn't you? I mean, the system's set up to do it.
Now, for the people who just tuned in, before you led with that caveat of if Jaden goes pro, you do not anticipate, right? I think Jaden will be back on the team next year.
I honestly have no idea. All I know.
Well, I don't know either. I'm just presuming.
All I know, Shea, is when Jaden, I've said this plenty of times on air, so I'm not saying anything I haven't said before. When Jaden committed to LSU or signed with LSU, I talked to plenty of people who covered him in high school and then at Arizona State, and the idea was always that he was going to be 3 into the league. COVID and a messy situation at Arizona State kind of derailed that, and he flirted with the draft last year, Shea. So it wouldn't surprise me if a guy who thought he was going to be 3 and done after his 4th year says, I'm just going to go take my shot at being a pro. But I have no insight. I would love to see him come back. I mean, to have a 5th-year guy, 2nd year here with this offense, with these coaches, with these players, I'd love to see him come back another year.
One thing I am curious of is how much NIL can get guys who are already on your team and debating to go to the NFL as a fringe guy or not back on your roster. Yeah. That's something people haven't talked about yet. I think when people think NIL, they just think recruiting high school kids. NIL's in play for the kids on the team right now, too. I'm curious if that comes into factor with some of these guys who are on the kind of the borderline of do you go pro or stay.
I think that will certainly be a thing for some people, but you know this as well as I do, Shea. Some guys just want to go pro. They're just ready to go start their pro career. And when that's the case, that's just what it is. So some interesting decisions as this roster for year 2 under Brian Kelly will really start to round into form starting next week when the portal opens. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Shea Dixon, of course, On3Sports, On3 the Bengal Tiger, and Shea, Michael Cobble, and I tonight on Sports Takeover on WBRZ+. So look for us there as well. All right, Shea, we appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.